this week on the Christmas show, the Markcast Christmas show. We're not really festive because we've both been working a lot, but we've got a Christmas gift for you.
We have a Christmas gift. The Rock is talking new XFL cities. The Rock is talking new XFL teams. And we are just lucky enough that we booked XFL insider Mike Mitchell already to do an hour and 10-minute interview this week. So we have lots of stuff to talk about.
I think it's amazing. I think we knew this was coming. We know that this is the time of the year now where you're going to start to hear big announcements. You're hearing it from the USFL, and that's building up with baby steps. And now with the XFL, we knew that come January, February, it's go time. And so they've, there was a time there a few months back, I don't know how too many people knew about this, where there was reconsideration of whether or not the XFL was going to be brought back or not. And I knew that once they press the go button and say, we're all in, they're all in. That means all in means financially.
You couldn't have planned that any better if you tried. It was like one of those happy accidents that you just planned, and then all of a sudden it happened the same day. It was probably the best luck we've ever had on the show. Because normally when we're on the show, the news breaks after we record. But this time, it broke before you recorded with Mike Mitchell. That was great.
I would rather be lucky than good. And I think we were both this week. It's a jam-packed show. We've got like 75,000 impressions on our retweet of The Rock interview today on Twitter. It's going to be a loaded show. I hope you guys enjoy.
We've got some CFL business that's wrapping up. A new GM head coach in Edmonton.
Yeah, we're talking, McLeod Bethel-Thompson's big fine, pushing the cameraman. We can't be doing that. Paul and I both work in video production. It's a testy subject.
It hits close to home. We've also got some USFL news. The promos that have been going around, I haven't seen them. Reid shames me for that. Very disrespectful to shame a busy person for not watching TV. Very disrespectful. We'll let it slide this time. It's all coming up this week on the Markcast. Welcome to another episode of the Markcast. Good Friday morning to everybody. Hopefully you're recovered from all your Grey Cup partying. If you were up in north of the border, if you were probably up north of the border, you might want to get checked for the Omicron. That's the thing now. It's hot in the streets. The Omicron.
Well, it's also Christmas Eve. This is a happy Christmas Eve. This is our big Christmas gift today. We tweeted this week. We have Mike Mitchell coming on, solo guest, really long. I went an hour and 8 minutes with Mike Mitchell. I went longer. I edited it down. But it is our Christmas gift to our listeners. We have lots of XFL news. We have lots of USFL stuff. So we have Mike Mitchell on answering voicemails. I got a call. I actually did like a call and got everyone to do voicemails. And so we have a lot of listener feedback today. It's a good thing.
Very cool. We got a giveaway coming up. Also, next week, what do we got coming up next week?
Yeah, so I was going to say, please like and subscribe. A lot of work today, everything doing, obviously we're recording Christmas Eve. Working on a good guest next week. Paul, would a current CFL quarterback do anything for you coming on the podcast?
Of course.
Well, we could have a current, he listens to the show, could have a current CFL quarterback coming on the show that's been in the news lately. So it could be exciting.
Looking forward to seeing that potentially happen. Of course, moving on with the show, the biggest news, the thing that went viral, the thing that blew up. The Rock was saying some things. The Rock was talking.
This was interesting. I was at my dentist today. I was getting my gums looked at. We're slowly working on getting my braces off now. Of course, now that I've got the approval to get my braces off, the orthodontist is on vacation until January. So now we are in a holding pattern. So The Rock was on the CNBC Tech Check podcast today. Listener Max sent this over, and he was asked about the XFL, and he said we're a little over a year away from launching our professional football brand that we're launching with Danny Garcia, Jerry Cardinal. He says we should be maybe within the next month or 2 months, we're going to be announcing our broadcast partners, which is exciting. And then also he said new teams, new cities, and very, very excited about that. So that is the part I think that is getting the most attention.
I mean, I've come back to the thing, like I feel like they should move LA out of LA, but we'll see what happens. I don't think they'll expand beyond 8. I think 8 will be still the number. I don't think you're going to add any more teams, but it'll be interesting to see exactly which teams move where.
Yeah, so we obviously, and this worked out well timing wise. I want to do, obviously, we'll do a little banter on this right now, but then Mike, luckily, this all came out before we recorded with Mike today. So besides obviously getting all your voicemails, we talked with Mike about it. It's interesting, like St. Louis coming back. Mike was mentioning, maybe some cities that we would assume, like Seattle, may or may not be, trying to kind of get the gauge of that. Mike says obviously that the international expansion is still big, right? Mexico is still high on the board. It just depends, what they're all getting in mind. But I think they want to go past 8. I was telling Mike, I think if they just come back and it's like 8 teams, but Houston's and San Antonio, that doesn't feel exciting to me, right? I feel like we need to have some cataclysmic shift here.
Yeah, that'd be. I mean, you keep St. Louis where there are, but I think. You might. The other 7 are up for grabs, in my opinion. Yep, other 7 are up for grabs. I think the Vipers are definitely a potential candidate that will move. It'll be interesting to see, which teams actually do move, because I don't think they expand beyond 8. I just don't see that being viable right now.
The interesting thing that I saw comments today was, if they're going to move the cities, what is the point of, if you're going to acquire all these licenses and rights and make all these purchases, but then you're going to move Houston and you're going to move Dallas and you're going to move LA, what is, what did we buy the league for then? I mean, I kind of get both debates of it. I mean, we've debated in the past, you're acquiring this fan base, however fragmented it is at this point. Do you roll with that at all? I don't really know. I don't know what the right decision is.
Hear more about that with Mike Mitchell coming up in the show. I want to circle back right now, though. The CFL, we'll wrap up our business with the CFL for the season. The Edmonton Elks have hired Chris Jones as their general manager and head coach. 4-year contract.
Yeah, this is big. Chris Jones was famously with Edmonton before, led them to a Grey Cup back in 2015. And then, left, went to the NFL, was coaching at a high school earlier this year before he got hired back by the Argos to be their defensive coordinator. Obviously, leaving the Argos now and going back to Edmonton to have both the GM and head coaching job. The joke has been he signed this 4-year deal now. Is he going to stick around again? Because he left before. It's one of those, fool me once kind of things. But obviously, Edmonton needs a shot in the arm. This is something that's certainly going to help them with that.
Pardon me. They definitely need a culture change up there. The culture change that they instilled just didn't work out. So it'll be interesting to see if Chris Jones in the second tenure does anything with that. Of course, I guess, he faced questions from the media about it. And he said he can't do more than just tell you what he's going to do. And he thinks his coaches can tell you that if he says he's going to do something, that's what he's going to do. A lot of cliches going on there. He says also, all I can do is tell them what I mean and mean what I say. There's just so many cliches in this quote. Yeah. He signed a 4-year deal in order to try to show the fact that this is where he wants to build a legacy.
Because again, it's when you leave, when you abruptly leave, you move around. He's had 7 different jobs in the last 10 years, and so then when you're signed back now and he's saying he wants to build a legacy, you're going to have a lot of questions with that. You're going to have a lot of questions. Are you here to stay? Think of all the changes that Edmonton made in the last year, bringing in Coach Elizondo and all of that. Obviously they're all gone now, so. It's tumultuous there. Chris Jones is a proven winner, though, right? He was there in the past. And I think if you're an Edmonton fan, I think you have to feel good about that. And especially him having the GM, kind of that dual role, which seems to be more popular in the CFL, kind of doing that.
But I think it's fair for Edmonton fans to kind of also have that trepidation, that kind of please don't hurt us again. So speaking of GM hires, the REDBLACKS have announced that Shawn Burke will become the second general manager in franchise history. He comes to Ottawa with nearly 15 years with the Hamilton Ticats, most recently serving as a senior director of player personnel and co-manager football operations for the runners-up last year.
Yeah, REDBLACKS famously, let go of their GM earlier this year and not having the best track record. I think they ended the season 2 and 14. I guess I'm doing the math. If I'm, but. Him coming in, the OSEG group is, excited about that. I'm really excited to experience the passion that Shawn brings in. Coming from the Ticats, he was several key roles there: assistant GM, director of football operations, football administration, and director of community relations. He also spent 3 years with Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, so kind of bouncing all those things. It seems like a good head. He's kind of carrying on that legacy that Desjardins, left in Ottawa, and kind of carrying on that flame and trying to, them and Edmonton are the 2 leagues that really need to rebuild here in the offseason. So
teams that really need to rebuild. Teams that need to rebuild, not leagues. You said
teams that need to rebuild. Yes.
We were there was some concerns and some questions raised about Hamilton's head coach Orlando Steinauer going down to Seattle, to Reid's neck of the woods, to go be the defensive coordinator at University of Washington. Fortunately for everybody involved, the university, except Fresno State apparently, they're not hiring Orlando Steinauer to be the head coach. I mean, a defensive coordinator at UW. They got UW. They got different people to do it. Looking at, what is it?
Jointly filled by William Engel and Chuck Morrell, both brought over with head coach Kalen DeBoran. Weird that they're going to have a joint defensive coordinator position.
I mean, that sometimes happens.
It feels.
I don't know if I agree with that kind of. I think there should be one defensive coordinator, one offensive coordinator, and sharing those responsibilities. You might get some bickering. I don't know. I've never believed in the two coordinator kind of thing, and sometimes when a head coach becomes a co-offensive coordinator, co-defensive coordinator, sometimes that causes some issues. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out for UW up there.
Yeah, so BC Lions promoting Ryan Rigmaiden to assistant GM and director, but also a shout out today to Nick Kowalski. I just saw this before we came on. He was on our live show, you'll remember, 2 weeks ago with Darren Bauman. He just got hired as the Lions videographer, official Lions videographer. He's moving to BC.
Him.
So that's to me obviously this is exciting, not from a football personnel point of view, but friend of the show, Nick Kowalski, being hired as the official Lions videographer. I think that's astounding. So
awesome. Good work, dude. Congrats to you.
That's cool. I would do that. I mean, I don't live in BC, but that'd be cool. That'd be a cool job.
It would be.
Matt Baker. That would have been a good job.
The CFL has fined McLeod Bethel-Thompson for inappropriate on-field incident with a camera person. Apparently, he had an incident with a camera person following the Eastern Final, but the amount of the fine was also not disclosed because the CFL never discloses these types of things. He made contact with a cameraman at the completion of the game. Does it say what kind of contact he had?
I watched it. Like, it was one of those, like, he was losing, kind of walking over to do the handshakes and all that. The camera guy was close. He kind of pushed him away. McLeod came out in kind of the post press conference stuff afterward, and kind of had a really sincere apology about it. And he said, I know they're trying to do their job and whatever. Because that's the thing, right? Like, football players only make the money they do because they're on TV being filmed by the people that film them. And I know as someone that also works with the camera and has had people tell you, not to do things and not to go places, like we televise sports with video cameras. And so if there's no television contracts, there's no contracts for you to play football. So
it kind of reminds me of this incident, like at the end of the Colorado game. There was a Colorado game against UCLA, I believe, up in Boulder. And the head coach of the Colorado, Carl Durrell, shoved a cameraman's camera down and then had to apologize for it. Calm down. We're not there to people are there to do a job. People that are there to do a job. We need to simmer down.
Well, that's the thing is, he was like, it was the post game, like he's walking, like you see every camera guy like following the losing quarterback to go do the handshake. He's like, get away. But numbers are funny because you see here Chris Edwards, he was the one that kind of got into the jumped into the stands. He got fined as well. He's suspended 6 games, which is like weird to me because, like, okay, let's say Chris Edwards gets let go. Let's say he gets picked up by Hamilton, so then he has to serve a 6-game suspension.
I think he'd be picked up by Hamilton if he gets led by Twilight.
Well, I'm just making that. But like if he got signed by, like if Shawn with Ottawa comes in and goes, we want Chris Edwards. And then that's weird to me. It's a weird like postseason suspension to go into effect next year.
Damn.
I don't know. I think that's odd.
I mean, the video is like
crazy.
You didn't expect to see something like that, at a CFL game. Those Argos players just seemed to be a little bit out of control. So, Chicago Bears working out 4 CFL players, including REDBLACKS returner Devontae Dedman. They held a workout today for 4 offensive CFL players. Also there was Edmonton Elks quarterback Taylor Cornelius, Stamps receiver and return specialist Malik Henry, and Rough Riders receiver Brandon Lenius. So hopefully, maybe somebody got picked up for this. The Bears aren't doing anything. So,
well, that's the thing. It's kind of interesting. It's when Hodge leads with this story, it's Devontae Dedman. That's great, but I said, yeah, it's also former XFLer Taylor Cornelius. And then the Bears signed Ryan Willis, which is pretty crazy, to their practice squad. He was, with all this USFL Spring League stuff, led the lineman to victory with Stan Bedwell last season. Remember, he was like the assistant quarterback that was on the podcast. But good for Ryan Willis going on the practice squad. But yeah, Bears are kind of in the, Matt Nagy's getting fired, right? This is like, Matt Nagy's
Liram Harajlu is back with the Carolina Panthers this time. We got to get this guy on the podcast.
I want Liram on the podcast. I want Liram on the podcast.
We talk about him all the time.
The life of a kicker, though. I mean, like Ernesto, all these kickers we have, Matt Mangles of the world, Ernesto's, like, I just couldn't imagine, like, live and die, sign, unsigned. But he was, Zane Gonzalez got injured from the Panthers. He got signed. Again, Panthers aren't doing anything right now, but good for him. Keep getting some reps. Keep getting some eyeballs. So
I think Matt Rule's on his way out, too.
Really? Yeah. Well, but he's year 2 of like a 3-year deal.
I think he's done.
You think he's done?
I think he's done. This Cam Newton thing has been a complete failure.
Yeah, $10 million.
It has been a complete failure. CFL teams revealing 10 negotiation list names on list. Jordan Tamu.
He was kind of on the Washington. He was on the practice squad with the whole Garrett Gilbert this week. Remember, because Heineke was out because of the vid. Garrett Gilbert got the call from the practice squad. They lost, but he was the AAF guy. But Tiamu was on their practice squad. I think he got let go. Mike Mitchell was saying now, but he's on there. CFL does that weird like negotiation. So it's like there are like you can't talk to anybody, but they're not committed to him. But it's like you can just like claim it. Like they can't. It's weird.
Yeah. Speaking of quarterbacks in CFL, the Alouettes have released Trevor Harris. They acquired him via trade from the Elks. And now they released him.
Well, you had the big bonus coming. You had $300,000 offseason bonus. So they re-signed Vernon Adams Jr. Through 2023. Could be interesting hearing from Vernon coming up here. Could be interesting kind of hearing what Vernon thinks about all this. So I just, it might be something to stick around here for in the next couple of weeks if you're curious how Vernon feels about being retained by the Montreal Alouettes.
Nick Lewis, Canadian Football Hall of Fame receiver, was on the Rod Peterson show. He wasn't too enthused by the prospect of owners seeing their pocketbooks projected by the league's new model of horizontal governance, particularly given some of the business decisions they were making in process of claiming poverty. He says, at the end of the day, I think the revenue share should be between the players and the league. It shouldn't be just between the different teams. Interesting.
I don't disagree, but that also doesn't happen, right?
I know.
I mean, like in the NFL does profit sharing, right? But they don't. I mean, the players get like a small percentage, right? They get, well, am I lying?
I mean, it's a feudal system. It really, yes, the players are getting paid good salaries. I'm not saying they're not, but like the only way you can really be a professional athlete and make it work afterward is if you put away, like Marshawn put away his money. Like he had spent a dime from his contract stuff. He was very smart with his money. It's just like, because like after you're done, you're not getting royalties on your likeness being sold. You're not receiving royalty checks from the NFL Network replaying your game or ESPN replaying your game. You're not seeing any of that. So,
Anyway,
it's not going to change.
Yeah, but this revenue sharing again. Ambrosi had no details about any of this when he announced it. Because again, Saskatchewan, if they make $300,000 a year, Argos are losing $10 to $12 million a year. So how do you revenue share between those?
I don't think you can.
You know what I mean? Like what you take a percentage of that doesn't mean anything. It's a drop in the bucket, but that's a huge war chest, right? The Saskatchewan is able to maintain. Same with Edmonton, same with Calgary. You have these players these teams that have this money set aside. Well, it's going to get wiped out. So
it'd be like they brought it up on the live show, that we did 2 weeks ago, that the smaller area teams that needed help from the big cities are now the pendulum swung in their favor, and now they're richer and they're not kicking back in. That's the first thing they need to address is like these community-led teams that were hurting now are fine and doing really well. It's the other side that's hurting. And there's no reciprocation of how much help they got years ago. And you want to share with the players too? Fascinating.
The most interesting thing is that the smallest population teams make the most money. It is the weirdest thing in the CFL. Like you would think for sure BC is rolling in money, and it's like it's not.
So. President of the CFLPA, Solomon Eliminian. He says that there needs to be more certainty for CFL players to sign multi-year contracts. Basically, I know in American baseball they can choose to non-tender you even if you've got a contract. Like that's here in America. This is like this is not. It seems like it's the idea of releasing players that you've signed to multi-year contracts is way more prevalent in CFL than any other sport. I noticed that. I was like, wow, they just release players left and right that they signed to multi-year deals. I see that. But the certainty isn't there for any professional athlete that gets those long-term deals anyway. It's just that the other teams don't want. The other teams pay so much more money for their athletes here in America that they couldn't afford to cut a player or non-tender them, because then they'd be paying a lot of money out of pocket regardless. So the only reason why they do it in the CFL is because the salary is already low. They're not taking that bad of a hit to pay out a little bit of money on this contract.
It's just hard. It's just frustrating. I mean, you just wish there was a better, situation going on. It's so hard to build cohesion on the field to get the fans. This thing, we're cheering the fans. They say on here, the jerseys switch every year, the names of the jerseys. Why would you ever buy a player jersey, right? Knowing, unless it's like the quarterback, you would never there's very few, I'm a BC Lions fan. There's very few BC Lions players I would feel comfortable picking up.
Right. No, there's very few Argos players. I wouldn't feel comfortable picking up a McLeod Bethel-Thompson.
I would not. I was just going to say that. I would not.
It's just the whole thing with American football teams is that we have a good idea that these players that we have, these franchise players that we will buy jerseys for, like the Tom Brady's and the Russell Wilsons, and these franchise players we buy these jerseys for, will stay in place for a long time, so we don't have to keep buying a new jersey every year, because that's just not. Maybe that's a good business model, though. Maybe, you're going to keep buying jerseys. We're just going to keep releasing the player that you buy a jersey from, and you have to buy another jersey, make more money off you. Maybe that's a good. Maybe they're thinking already. They're thinking vertically instead of horizontally. What do I know?
They're for each S.
The CFL should consider everything except changing the number of players and downs, according to Glenn Suter, TSN broadcaster and retired defensive back.
Yeah, we had a lot of conversations last week with Tim Baines on the show about this. I don't know if Lost and all the live show stuff, did we get your thoughts on the potentially moving to 4 downs as a way to incentivize people to watch the CFL?
We didn't, but I'm of two worlds there. I'm like, if you do 4 down football, do your diehards just go, well, I don't want to watch it anymore? Your diehards are your people that are driving your product right now. Do you want to alienate those people right now? Part of me says it's the kind of person that goes, well, I'm not going to watch this crap anymore. But they're right back on in front of the TV, the next Sunday. It's like, and I hate to get political, but there were a lot of people that would call him Kaepernick kneeled and no one did anything. There are a lot of people that are like, well, I'm not going to watch this damn sport anymore. And guess what? The very next Sunday, they're in front of the TV watching the damn sport. So I would hope that would be the case. And I don't want to call anybody a hypocrite. I would hope that would be the case, that even if you gripe a little bit, you're still watching Canadian football when it comes on. I would hope.
One just side note on this. I was listening to Darren that was with Nick on our show a couple weeks ago. He was on Rod's show today, and a lot's been made about how great the CFL game was this year, right? How good the championship game was, how good the playoffs were. And they're like, well, see, there's no problems with the CFL. We're back. And Darren was saying, the people that were watching the Grey Cup or the people that were watching the playoffs, those are your diehard fans. It's the people that were watching all year that maybe tuned out when things weren't exciting, that maybe aren't tuning back in. That we're always focused on well, see, that was a really good game. What are people talking about? It's the people watching the game aren't the people you're trying to attract in. You're trying to attract the people that aren't watching the game. And I just don't know if moving to 4 downs would ever do that. I just don't think one extra Canadian is incentivized to watch the CFL because there's 4 downs.
That's not a marketing thing. The whole problem is the marketing. Changing 4 downs is not going to fix the marketing. You're just going to be like Canadian football the next down. It's not going to fix the marketing. Video game. God, video game. Please. All right, we're going to take a break. Mike Mitchell's coming up right now, and then we'll come back with some USFL stuff.
Well, this is our holiday gift to our listeners, to our viewers, to everybody. We have XFL Insider, friend of the show. We have Mike Mitchell. Mike Mitchell, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Happy holidays to you, Reid, and thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, I would rather be lucky than good sometimes. And we booked this, and I meant that during the holidays. I said Mike is a big enough guest. We can cover a lot of a wide swath of things, as opposed to trying to track down a bunch of people over the holidays. And then breaking news before we get into all of our listener submitted voicemails. The Rock basically blew up the world today with the announcement of potentially new cities, new teams, so things. So I guess what is your take on Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's interview today on CNBC before we get into all these voicemails?
I think it's amazing. I think we knew this was coming. We know that this is the time of the year now where you're going to start to hear big announcements. You're hearing it from the USFL, and that's building up with baby steps. And now with the XFL, we knew that come January, February, it's go time. And so they've there was a time there a few months back. I don't know how too many people knew about this, where there was reconsideration of whether or not the XFL was going to be brought back or not. And I knew that once they press the go button and say, we're all in, they're all in. That means all in means financially. And so, and they understand the risks and everything involved and what they're trying to do and what I've written about for so long now at xflnewshub.com. They have a grand vision of things. They're looking to be global. They're looking to do multi-dimensional content distribution. And they're trying to do a lot of different things that are new age, that are, with the future in mind. And so to hear Dwayne come out today, which I was, as I was working on intel for this show. And so I was hoping to be the first to let everybody know that an announcement was coming on their TV partners, emphasize partners, broadcast partners. So Dwayne going out there on CNBC and telling everybody that within the month, 2 months, they would be releasing new teams, new cities. That's another thing I've chronicled for quite some time over at xflnewshub.com. The changes around the margins, where that's inevitable for the XFL and the direction they're headed in. And now this is fascinating. We're entering a realm here with alternative football, where you have the USFL on the horizon with Fox and NBC. That's a next level package right there. Hopefully they do the right things by the players and coaches in football and all that. And then you have the XFL with Redbird Capital Partners, Dwayne Johnson, Danny Garcia. There's a lot of egos involved here, Reid. These people are not used to failing and don't want to fail. Eric Shanks is a heavyweight. And Fox, because of the XFL, interestingly enough, Fox snooped around purchasing the XFL out of bankruptcy in 2020. They eventually didn't. Obviously, we know the story now. Redbird, Rock, Danny did. But Eric Shanks is a heavyweight. Fox is a big deal. They see the opportunity. They saw the success of the XFL. They think spring football is viable. They're going in. And Shanks is not used to failing. Fox is like I said, they're a heavyweight in the industry, and Shanks is as well. And then you got The Rock and Redbird Capital and Danny. And, we see the success that The Rock has had in his movie career, in his Terramana, Tequila, and everything else that he's attached to is successful. And that has a lot to do with his drive and ambition. And then Danny Garcia is a tremendous business person, and she has that same drive and ambition. And then Redbird Capital, I mean, all you have to do is do research on them and see how successful they've been. They're used to winning. So to get into this kind of field where, let's be honest, these leagues have lost so much in the past and they're almost guaranteed to fail. And so to take this risk, they know the risks that are involved. They realize that this is going to take a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of financial commitments, and a lot of long-term patience, but they're ready to go all in. They're not going into these endeavors, be it Shanks and Fox and company or Redbird and Rock and everybody else on that side. They're going into this thinking big and thinking about winning big. I think this is going to sound crazy. This will probably age poorly, I know, but I think this is going to work. I think we're finally going to, I think the environment now, we have this crazy thing hovering over us. It's COVID. It's not going away, unfortunately. So that's a big factor why the XFL is coming back in 2023, why they didn't come back in 2021 or 2022. It's a big factor why, although it's more financial on their end, that USFL is in a hub setting. So we don't know what's the next chapter in this crazy pandemic deal we've got going on. But I think that both those entities see the viability. And I think for once, there's a real shot here that spring football will work and will stay. I think there's, because live sports content has become so valuable because it's DVR proof. I think, and because of the viability we saw from the AAF and the XFL, how good the players were in those leagues, the quality you can have, how many good players there are out there that get overlooked, like the Tyler Huntleys and the Taylor Heineke's, who kind of find a way through the back door to get in, but they are such a small percentage of the players that do. I think there's a market for this, and the expectation level is not that high. You know, it's not like the old days where you had to be on the air and deliver 5, 10, 15 million viewers out of the gate. These networks are happy if you deliver a few 100,000 live viewers every week, or 500,000 or 1 million or more, maybe. In the XFL's case, that the AF did a little bit of that. So I think we got a shot here. I think this is for people like you and me and many others who are listening to this, watching this, who are proponents of this concept. I think we have a legit shot that this might actually work out. The question is, can it work out with both of these leagues together in the same field? We're going to find out. It's going to be fun. It's the battle we were expecting from the AAF and the XFL, which would have been fascinating to see them fight over talent and players and coaches and all that. We might get that with the USFL and XFL. And 2022 is going to be a fascinating year for both leagues, just to see what moves they both make.
Well, it's fascinating because we're seeing, and I think we talked about this last time we were on, but we're seeing two different versions of the same thing, right? I mean, we're trying to launch a successful football league. We have one taking the year. You know, I listened to Danny Garcia on the, why is she going on the Founder podcast? Come on the Markcast. But, talking multi-dimensional and streaming and all these things, right? And I think we've said before, we have the USFL, which is like the caveman, right? It's caveman, versus the Matrix. And so, one of these, maybe both, but, we will get to see both of them live out in real time, which is tremendously exciting, obviously for fans of spring football, but then obviously just us talking about it on the podcast. So.
It's interesting. I've talked to some people in the last week that were a part of the XFL in 2020, just to gauge their opinions on what they feel about the USFL. And surprisingly, what I've gotten from people higher up in the XFL is that they're very bullish on what the USFL has planned. Now, I know you made mention of the caveman thing, and that could still be the case because right now they're not a fully fledged league going into markets, and that's for a reason. They're hoping to sell their franchises and make a lot of money off of that. And this is Fox's opportunity, an actual big network, to actually own their own league, get all the money from advertising, get all of that. So we'll see how that goes. But a lot of people are surprisingly bullish on the USFL, and they think they feel the XFL is in for a dogfight. Now we'll see. Money talks. When it comes down to talent and players and all that, we'll see what type of product the USFL produces. They have to do right by the players and coaches. And it feels a little bit like the AAF because of the rush nature of, here we are, April's when their season starts. They got to round up teams quickly and get them on the field. Hopefully the quality doesn't suffer. They need to lure people in. I know from what I've heard, contracts are already being put out to coaches. One other thing that I've heard recently, talking to people who are hoping to be in the USFL, coaches that is that the USFL is looking to have a whole new clean slate with their coaching staffs this coming season. They don't want to resemble TSL, their coaching staffs they had there. That might leave some of the guys like the Hal Mummies and others out of the mix, which would be a shame. I'd like to see them part of the USFL, but it sounds like Shanks and company want to go with different coaches and have a different field in the spring league. They don't want to feel like, even though this is going to have the same hub setting, they don't want to feel like this is just the spring league with USFL put on it, which kind of feels that way. I can see that argument a little bit. So they're going to have to do some big things and make the correct moves in order to I don't mean this to disrespect Brian Woods in any way. I don't know him personally. I respect his journey because I know he's deep down, he's a football fan like you and I, and he wants to see this concept work and he truly believes in it. But nothing about the USFL needs to resemble the spring league at all. from a financial standpoint, or the way they took care of their players and coaches and all that. So we'll see. We'll see. It's going to be interesting. They have some interesting and fascinating people. I mean, listening to Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt, Brock Heward was supposed to be a part of the broadcast, would be fun for the USFL. They have a real chance. It's great for the players to be on NBC and Fox and to get that exposure. We saw with the XFL, they were only around for 5 weeks, and the tape those players got was immeasurable. Guys in the CFL like Dietrich Nichols and Sean Oakman and others excelling, Trayson Deku, the list goes on. And then you got, of course, guys in the NFL. We watch it every week with the Spring League guys sprouting up. I'm watching the Browns game. I see Michael Dunn at guard smashing people up just like he did in the playoffs last year against the Steelers. I'm watching Garrett Gilbert, who did a respectable job, I think, on 3 days' notice of coming in. I know they didn't win Washington. Of course, he's replacing Taylor Heineke, an XFL guy. Unfortunately, Jordan Teamu got released earlier today, so we'll see how that goes with him. But that was kind of interesting to have all those XFL and AAF quarterbacks all on the same roster at the same time. But we see it all through the league. There's over 30 guys right now, over 24 players in the NFL right now. They're part of the XFL. We see Josh Johnson, how well he played when he was thrown into duty. So, and the XFL was only around for 5 weeks. These were brand new coaching staffs, brand new teams, still learning each other, still learning the rules of the league. And for them to produce that amount of talent in that limited amount of time is very impressive. So if the USFL and the XFL can actually last, that would be tremendous for these players, because then you'd get to see a full body of work for them, and it'll open up other avenues for them, help them extend their pro career. So I'm excited about that aspect, about so many players getting opportunities in the upcoming future.
I have one last question, and we do want to get to the voicemails, because we could talk all day. I don't need bronze to figure out stuff to talk about like Mitchell about. It is interesting that you say, because that's always been my theory, is that the USFL is the spring league. We are no longer the jousters, right? We are the stallions, whatever. It's interesting to me. I've had, even last night, Harrison, one of our longest listeners, are you worried about this? I go, Brian did the spring league like out of his basement for 3 years. Like, do you really think now I'm being facetious, but like,
I know what you mean.
But to have all the, the skills and the money and the talent that Fox has, like, they did it. And I was even telling Dorothy about this, that, even the San Antonio one that shut down, they flew everyone back to Orlando and finished that season. They didn't have to do that. They didn't have to give those players that game. I mean, and I don't know, now obviously we have the lingering lawsuit, right, with Indianapolis and all, right. So there's two sides to every coin. But, they didn't have to do any of that. So it is just funny to me that people are sitting here, Jay Noakes, I know, in the groups. Well, what do we think about that? I'm like, Brian did this with duct tape and cardboard. Like, I think we can facilitate an 8-team bubble season here. And what people want.
It's hard to shake the reputation of the Spring League. I like the Spring League. I covered it. I covered the games. I reported on the ratings. I did game recaps, all that. I wrote about the players in the league. So I root for those leagues to succeed and exist always. But it's hard to shake the reputation, the Spring League had, being kind of like rinky dink. And so, but you have to, because Fox is involved with Eric Shanks, and I know somebody who was involved in the early stages of the XFL back in 2018, before people really knew about, the Oliver Luck hires and all that stuff, Doug Whaley's and Optimum Scouting. I know somebody who's assisting, I can't mention who that is, but is assisting the USFL at the moment, higher up guy, marketing guy. And he's getting involved because he believes in Eric Shank's vision here. And it's no secret, and it's really easy to read the tea leaves on this one, why Fox is starting, with baby steps, because a lot of these leagues, they bleed so much money in the early going that they drown immediately. So they're trying to not go all in at first, spend hundreds of millions of dollars, and then see no return in sight. They're trying to make sure that they can cut expenses early on and build up their profit margins with sponsors and all that, selling franchises, all that. It's an unique strategy. Start small, build big. It could work. And, the only reason you don't doubt it is because of Shanks. If you're thinking about, I hate to say it this way, but if you're thinking about the Woods aspect, it's understandable why some people would have trepidation and say negative things about it lasting. But you got to keep thinking about the Fox aspect of this. You have to think about how successful Eric Shanks has been in his field. He hasn't run a league before, but you have to respect that aspect of it. And this is a little bit of a different animal Hopefully it's a completely different animal, but it's a little bit of a different animal than the spring league was. So it's going to be fascinating. I'm so excited that there are all these strong entities and corporations that believe in this concept, and they're willing to try to make it work. And so, because it looked for a while after the AAF died, and then unfortunately the XFL with COVID, that perhaps this concept could be dead for a long time unless the NFL decided to run their own spring league, which they did way back when with teams in Canada and everything else. And that didn't really work out for them, but maybe 2021 is a different time frame for all that. But anyhow, I'm happy that, I understand the Jay Noakes and other people who have doubts about it. And I get it. You have to prove it first. A lot of these leagues still have to prove themselves. Let's face it, Reid. Even if, we hear the broadcast partners with the XFL, even if they announce coaches and players and all that, and we get all excited about that, even if they get to the field and start playing games, we're still going to be sitting there going, fingers crossed, these guys, hopefully they make it through the year and hopefully they stick around. So until we see that, we have to see that first with the USFL, with the XFL, before we completely believe it. But I'm excited that they're going to try. I love it that they're getting up to the plate and they're swinging for the fences. Go for it.
Did you say that there was a time when they weren't going to go forward with the XFL again? Was that buried in your first answer between
a little bit
2021 and now? Or
sure. I'm not saying that they weren't going to move forward, but there was consideration. There was a time frame where they considered whether or not they were going to move forward with the property. There wasn't a time frame where they said we're not, but they did weigh everything before now that they have the executive team in place and they have that all, obviously it's easy to see. They have everything lined up and they're ready to go. They announce they announce every division that they have set up. Their executives there in specific divisions there. And now we're, obviously the broadcast partners coming up in a month or two and everything else. And so there was a time where Redbird and everybody involved had to look at all the different angles. COVID's a big factor in all this. The XFL is going to be looking for multiple revenue streams. I mean, that's what Redbird's all about. And so, they're not going to be just live gate driven. But they wanted to make sure that there's a chance for the live gate to be a part of it. And at least we don't know where we're headed with this crazy COVID stuff. We'll see. But hopefully by 2023, when they get on the field, the world's got a little bit of a better handle on things. And, we'll see. Science catches up and we're getting there a little bit. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, there was a time where there was, the reflection, reassessing whether or not to push forward completely with this. Once they put that executive team in place, once they made their announcements, once Jerry Cardinal went out there and said, we're going to be hearing news with an increasing crescendo, all these big announcements that were coming, there's no going back now. So there was a time too when a lot of the XFL supporters felt like, we're a little worried. Like, why aren't we hearing anything? Why isn't there transparency? Why? Maybe they're not coming back. And there was I got a lot of that from people. Like, I don't think so. I don't think so, Mike. And I'm saying, no, they're planning on it. I'm telling you. So a lot of people like us moved on to the CFL and figured, hey, this might be our league that we cover. Us with CFL News Hub and all the great work you guys did during the past seasons covering the CFL. It's awesome. I want to say this, I appreciate all the entities that exist out there that cover these leagues. And you can see how many people appreciated your coverage of the CFL, our coverage of the CFL. So many people reached out to me that never watched the CFL before, read my articles and got into the Toronto Argonauts and all that. So I think that's really cool. And I think a lot of people on the Canadian side saw how open-minded we were and how pure our intentions are in terms of our love for football and for the existence of these leagues. So these leagues have a hard time getting mainstream media to follow them. Even the CFL has been around as long as it has, gets ignored in its own country. And so people appreciated you, Reid, and Paul for actually covering the CFL, bringing on their coaches, their experts and all that, and bringing attention to the league. They really appreciate it. And it was awesome to see the Grey Cup. I was a little jealous. I couldn't make it. So, and the league itself was so forthcoming and so helpful, handing out credentials and giving us access and all that. So I just wanted to throw that in there. I think it was really cool what took place during the CFL season.
Yeah. I said, the premise of the episode today is it's a throwback, a Twilight throwback, right? We had, Team Edward and Team Jacob back in the day. And so I said, are we Team XFL or are we Team USFL now, right? I think that Jacob would be the XFL, right? Like the new hotness, right? He's coming on. And you have Edward, right? It's the USFL coming back, the vampire, right? I mean, I thought it worked pretty well. But that was the thing that killed me about all this CFL stuff is I'm like, all the stuff that you guys have gotten for years about you're not the NFL, you're NFL light, you're not like it's all the same. I don't want to go down this too much right now, but but it's all the same, right? And even people that are like, well, I don't want the USFL. We have listeners, right? Well, I don't want that to succeed, or we don't. I'm like, or I want alternate football, but not that way. And you're like, well, these are jobs for players and coaches and staff and concession workers and stadium people and marketing people and social media people. I mean, these are a lot of people involved in this, right? And so, just because you want it the way the XFL is doing it or the way the USFL is doing it, I mean, ultimately, this is just giving spotlight to the players and the staff and the coaches that are trying to work and get tape. So, right,
and that's why we root for these leagues. We root for the CFL to be successful and to be popular and exist. I've been a fan for decades. So, and then we want the USFL exist, the XFL exist, and to thrive and survive ultimately. For those reasons that you just mentioned. So that's what we're in this for. And I think that it's genuine, our passion and our love for it. And I'm excited. I'm excited that so many people are interested in this. So it's going to be fascinating. The CFL angle with the USFL and XFL is interesting because I've had CFL players who reached out to me and said that they're interested in coming back to the States and they hope that these leagues come up. Several guys are starters on CFL teams. So that could be an interesting thing. I know the CFL fans have seen this movie before. They've heard this song before. Yes. With these leagues possibly sprouting up and taking talent away from them. So they've seen how that movie's ended before, but it's a viable thing to look into the future in terms of whether or not the USFL and XFL could take away some talent from their league, So, the ratio prohibits a lot of Americans from going to Canada to begin with or making Canadian rosters. So if a USFL and XFL are viable and exist, that's going to be another avenue. That's good for players and coaches, by the way. I know if you're waving a flag for one of your chosen leagues there, maybe it's not so great for you, but it's great for the players and the coaches to have those options. And hopefully they spring up and they're strong. So we'll see.
All right, enough preface here. We're going to get this is the long promise. Now I'm going to tell you, Mike, we have 12 voicemails. Okay, don't be overwhelmed.
I love it.
I will be here as long as you want to be here.
Let's do it.
I understand that you also have time. So I just want you to keep that in mind in answering some of these, right? Just keep in mind there's right, because we could talk, we could do 10 minutes on these. So I just want you get what I'm saying. So what we're going to do, and at the end, we're going to play all the voicemails, we're going to answer them, and then you are going to pick a winner, and we are going to, they get to their choice of USFL merchandise from the USFL shop. Not the $60 crew shirts that are overpriced, but like the ugly beanies or the sweatpants, right? Or like it looks like a dreidel. So we're going to give that at the end. So we're going to answer.
So pick the best question. You're saying, right?
It doesn't have to be the best. It's up to you. You decide. Ooh. So they get to be mad at you. So we're going to play these. We're going to go first off. This is a longtime listener, Kyle. Kyle's going to start us off, and then we'll roll through these. We'll see how we do.
All right.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Reid, Paul. Hope you guys are having a great week. Happy holidays to you guys as well. Great idea for letting us ask a question to Mike while he's on the show. Hopefully this is going to make the air because I got a great question for him. So, Mike, if you're listening, all spring leagues, whether it was the AAF or USFL or XFL, a lot of these leagues have this persona of being a developmental league, a league where players can showcase their stuff, whether they're young players or old players, basically giving players another opportunity, And we've heard it in the past through interviews, where players will talk about the opportunity that they've been given to help bring them to the next level without actually saying the NFL. It's often looked at as if they're meaning, hey, we're given an opportunity here. Hopefully they can make it to the NFL. So my question to you is this. Do you think the XFL can change that persona for the players? For the players to not necessarily want to come to the league to make it to another level, but to come to the league and to remain in the league, and to showcase their capabilities, from within the XFL, So do you think the XFL is going to be able to change that? Let us know what you think.
I would also add coaches as well, right? Players and coaches.
Sure.
Maybe one. So
Absolutely.
thoughts on that?
Great question by Kyle. I'll say that if the XFL or USFL can actually last and be around for 5 or 10 years, you'll get to the point where players in college will actually aspire to be in the XFL and USFL. These entities haven't been viable long-term options in the past. So the avenue has always been, let me just get to the NFL. And there's no question, at the end of the day, these leagues are by default developmental leagues. So there's no need to label yourself as a developmental league because that's basically what you are anyway. And anytime you label yourself as a developmental league per se, you're putting a minor label on you. So you're going to be treated like you are minor. So I would suggest that these leagues lasting will create a whole new world where players actually see the XFL and USFL as long-term options and aspire to be in those leagues, depending on how those leagues are run. If the XFL is an innovative, fun league, great for players, coaches, pays well, players will aspire to be in that league. These leagues need to be around long enough for that to become a reality. When they're in the early stages, you're not paying like NFL teams pay and all that. So, you got to remember that only 1.9% of all college football players make the National Football League. So you're talking about over 98% of college football players that never get an opportunity to extend their pro careers mostly in the United States. So, there's going to be a lot of players that will love to see these leagues survive and thrive. And you have to get to that point first. You get to that point, then we'll live in a reality where college players aspire to be in the XFL, USFL, or whatever.
Also Payne, right? Like we said time before, Payne and Mark, I think has said on his podcast, that he's heard and maybe he has heard through you, whatever, that USFL is going to offer hopefully competitive, right? Pay. It's really hard though, right? I mean, that was the big thing with the XFL. The one thing I thought was so interesting in Danny's interview with the founder was they were asking, and she goes, well, Dwayne, went to the NFL, couldn't cut it. Went to the CFL, couldn't cut it. And then if the XFL would have existed, he would have gone there. I'm like, you are really setting up your hierarchy of where, I thought that was a really not a good soundbite. You know what I mean? Of well, you couldn't make it here and you couldn't make it here, but we're going to be that third string. I did think that was worrisome.
Yeah, I guess she was going through the history of what The Rock went through, right? But I think I'll say this, if the XFL was around when The Rock didn't make it into the NFL, he may have considered the XFL, depending on what kind of league it was. If it was just in a startup where they weren't paying much and all that, and they weren't unsure about what channels or what networks are going to be on, who's backing it, all that. If the XFL was a viable entity when The Rock didn't make it to the NFL, I think there's no doubt that he would have stayed in the States. So I get the wording and the way the pecking order worked and the way she was saying it, because she was just going through his history. But and I know CFL fans might get angry with me at this, but I think if the XFL is around and exists, there are going to be players that consider the XFL before they do going to Canada. So it depends on pay. It's that's the bottom line at the end of the day. But if you have an opportunity to play in the United States on ABC, Fox, NBC, all that, to have NFL scouts actually come to your games. If you're playing an NFL style game that more translates to the National Football League, then you'll see more players decide to play in the States with the XFL and USFL and all that.
All right, we got one. Richard, for real. Richard Humphrey here coming at you.
Hey, Markcast. This is Richard, better known on Twitter, Richard for real. I heard that you had Mike Mitchell on the show. So the question I have for today is that, do you think that the USFL or the XFL can get former NFL players to be the coaches? And when do you think the USFL is going to start doing a drafting? And do you think the timeline that the XFL is doing, that they had showed, are they really going to keep their word, or you think it might be, just a ruse? Thanks.
Richard, that was 8 questions, but I appreciate that.
I love it. I love Richard, by the way. He's a great follower of these leagues and does a great job. I like his idea of players turned coaches. That's a little bit of outside the box thinking. As we've seen with Deion Sanders, he's made quite an impact on Jackson State and FCS schools and bringing attention to that. And I would love to see, some contrast with the XFL coaches or USFL for that matter, because I think sometimes a lot of these leagues have a lot of the same, I hate to use the term retreads, but they have a lot of coaches that are older legacy coaches that have been out of the loop for a while that are looking to get back in. And I think there's value to those types of coaches too, but you'd like to see a different play calling, some new, fresh thinking, just as a contrast there. So I wouldn't mind, way back when Isaac Bruce tried to be a part of the St. Louis AAF team, and that would have been interesting. We've seen now the Eddie George and the Deion Sanders and what they're doing. Deion especially, he's done such a tremendous job. You see him getting the top recruits in the nation now to come to his school. So that's awesome. It's a new age. It's a new era for sure. So I'd love to see that. I'm trying to remember the other parts of Richard's question. So hopefully, Reid, I apologize, but I can't recall everything he threw in there, but I like that suggestion by Richard. And I think it's a possibility, that the Rock will look to Rock and Redbird and others will look towards potentially luring former players into the league as, to take on a CEO type position. That's kind of what Deion's done in Jackson State. He's got Dennis Thurman, who used to be a part of the AAF and other leagues. He's got him there as a defensive coordinator. So you could see more of a CEO type player turn now coach coming into the league and being a part of the XFL. I wouldn't mind seeing that in a couple of spots. It would be cool.
You were talking about retreads. I was trying to find my Jerry Glanville sunglasses. I don't know what you mean when you talk about, but it's like some of these coaches coming back again. Jerry's going on, 80 years old.
Jerry's a legend. There's no doubt about it. But and it's nice to have a couple of guys like that, a part of the league that, it not only brings notoriety, but, it's like fun throwback and all that. And those guys still have the hunger. Glanville, I forget how old he is, but the guy still
80.
got.
He's like 80 years.
It's pretty awesome. I hope I have the same energy if I'm lucky enough to reach that age. So, but it's cool to have coaches like that. But you want to see some fresh faces, some new guys, some outside the box thinking. You never know. Maybe a Joe Brady coaches in the XFL or somebody just even a player coach like Richard mentioned. I would like to see those types of coaches involved in the league.
All right, we got one here from Adam.
My question is for Mike Mitchell for this Friday's Christmas special. I have two questions. My first question is, aside from talking about expanding or merging within the USFL or XFL, why doesn't the Canadian Football League look outside of Halifax and expand within Canada, such as Quebec City, London, Ontario, or even the fastest growing city in Canada, Kelowna, British Columbia? My second question is, why can't the Canadian Football League force its hand in its television contract, forcing Bell and TSN to put the big games and the playoff games, the Grey Cup games on traditional network TV? Rogers, National Hockey League, after the first few years of their agreement with the CBC, they extended that contract immediately, knowing that without the CBC, the TV numbers would not even come close to what they're getting now. Thanks a lot for taking my question, guys. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and all the best.
So we have CFL expansion, and then we have why doesn't CFL get more money for their TV ratings, to boil it down.
I got to tell you, it was a very intelligent question there by Adam. Happy holidays to you. Thanks for giving me that. I agree with both sentiments there. You need to expose your product more. So why would you limit it to pay services and all that? You want your biggest games, your playoff games, your Grey Cup on free television. I'm totally in agreement with that. Why would you limit that? As far as expansion goes, that's part of the problem with the CFL is they're only a 9-team league, right? And then so when you look at it, they limits their profits. So it limits so the more teams, the problem is you add on expenses when you expand. And you have your fingers crossed that your new ownership groups can deal with handling all the finances and resources that you're going to need. So I think they do need to expand. You don't want to go too crazy, but adding a couple of teams in those areas that Adam mentioned makes complete sense for the CFL. I'd love to see them go to 10 and then eventually to 12 and then go from there. The league has to be strong enough in its foundation to be able to handle expansion. They can barely right now, they're talking about revenue sharing, and basically you have a few teams that are making a lot of revenue for the league, that would have to hold up the other teams that you would think in the big cities would be making the most money in the league. And so it's kind of a strange dynamic that the CFL has going there. But hopefully their new revenue models will help them expand and grow. The business model has been flawed for quite some time with the CFL. That's nothing new. I'm not saying anything revolutionary there. Anybody who looks into it, does research on it, can see that. And so they need to do a better job as a league on the whole. They're so live gate driven, but that's like a 1985 model. We're in the year 2021. So they really need to, work on fantasy football, continue to work on gambling, and continue to broaden their horizons and not be so limited in their thinking. And so that's kind of the story there, but that's how I feel. That's a great question, Adam. Love it.
Yeah, you can't have 10 teams. You gotta have even. You gotta have even divisions. You can't have 5 and 4. I don't do.
I agree.
This long-time listener, Zach Feudo. I can never pronounce that.
Hey guys, I just wanted to know if you were involved with any of the 3 leagues today. Just pick one. Knowing everything that we know, what would you say to make sure that your league is the one that succeeds over any of the others?
So basically, back to the question. Thank you, Zach, very much. Zach's a long-time listener. If you had to pick a dog in this fight, right? Obviously we try to cover this unbiasedly as possible. But if you had to pick a dog, USFL, XFL, CFL, what do you feel the strongest about here moving forward in the next 5 years?
Ooh, that's an excellent question.
Zach and I tag team.
I like it. It's a good tag team. Thanks, Zach, for the question. If I had to pick a dog at this moment, I would say the CFL. If I had to pick a dog for the future, I would say the XFL. With the USFL not far behind because of the Fox aspect. Because it's tough. I think all 3 have potential. I know this sounds like a diplomatic answer, but I think all 3 have potential. The CFL has been around for a long time. The quality of the product on the field is excellent. I've always felt that way. I've always enjoyed the CFL. So I don't see issues there. I see issues on the business end for them. So whether or not they can wake up and make the right moves, that remains to be seen. There are a lot of flaws to the CFL's game off the field. The XFL, I have a lot of faith in Redbird Capital and Dwayne Johnson and Danny Garcia. So that's a good bet. And the USFL has a chance. They're just starting out. So you can't measure up to a league that's been around as long as the CFL has. But I think all 3, it sounds crazy and sounds foolhardy on my part, but I think all 3 can be viable. If I had to pick one, CFL now, long-term XFL.
I was still, we kicked around a lot of ideas in all these merger talks. I still think the CFL, XFL, mega 8-team league, I still believe that was the best of anything we came up with, was the cross-continental, North Division and the South Division and all that stuff. We have one from, now, the service that we use taps out your voicemails at a minute 30, and Donald Mitchell used every single second of his minute 30. I think he gets caught off at the end of this. But Don,
is he related? Is he related to me, Donald?
This is interesting.
Possible.
He brings all this up in the question.
Good morning, Markcast. It's the 21st of December, so happy Winter Solstice Day. You guys do a fantastic job covering the CFL and all the other leagues. For Mike Mitchell, this is your long-lost cousin, Don Mitchell. I'm one of those white-haired older folks who seem to be the only ones populating the CFL stadiums these days, according to the talking heads.
Throwing shade.
But the funny thing is, when I was a youngster back in the 80s, these same conversations were being held. Too many old white-haired guys in the stands, scoring's not good enough, play is inferior, on and on and on. So, in your mind, is the CFL in any worse danger than it was pre-2000 than it is now post-2000? And what is your thoughts on this idea of changing the rules? Personally, I think the rules are just fine. We just need to allow our players to play and offensive coordinators to get a little more brave. Love your show, guys. Keep doing what you're doing, and I will see you in Regina for Grey Cup 2022.
And we officially booked our Airbnb for Regina. So there you go, Don. What do you think about that change in the rules? Haven't got your thoughts on the 4 downs and all the other stuff that came out from Grey Cup.
I'll jump into that, but does Donald get excluded from winning this contest because he's related to me?
Is it one of those like friends and family? You know, you work for McDonald's Corporation, you can't win Monopoly, right?
I like it. Yeah, that's true. I like his opinions there. Good job, Donald. As far as the CFL, the way I look at it, people tend to look at this from a negative standpoint. I tend to look at it from a more positive. I think there's room for growth with the CFL. I think the CFL already has a nice base. It just needs to get to the next level. And it has nothing really to do with inferior play or all that other nonsense. To me, the play wasn't inferior this year. There were reasons why maybe scoring was down. You know, you had a 2-year layoff. These teams weren't together for a long time. You had all the COVID issues that happened. I do agree with him. He made a point towards the tail end there. I think the play calling needs to improve. I think there needs to be a little bit more innovation involved there. I think more teams in the CFL need to consider going for it on 3rd down, especially when they're near midfield and entering into territory there. I think as far as 4 downs, 3 downs, it would be fascinating to see what the CFL game would look like with 4 downs. Just maybe I'm a glutton here and I'm a little bit of a troublemaker. It would be interesting if the CFL had their own developmental league. It'd be fun to see them implement that and just to see what it would be like, what it would look like. But personally, I would keep it as 3 downs. I do have a pet peeve here, and I have discussed this in the past with guys like, shout out, by the way, to Ben Grant from X's and Argos. It's a wonderful podcast that covers the CFL. I discussed this with him in the past, and perhaps I'll get some heat for this. If I had to choose one thing, I'd keep the dimensions, all that. I would move the goalpost to the back of the end zone. And for several reasons. Number one, CFL teams have issues in the red zone. They have a lack of variety on plays. You're not going to run any mesh plays into the post. It takes longer for players to clear that goalpost area, you know, so that plays take too long to develop because of that obstruction in the end zone. I understand that this would move field goals back, but you'd have more teams going for it. So instead of, you know, trying for teams right now in the Canadian Football League, if you get stopped on the 40-yard line, it's a 47-yard field goal. But if you move the goalpost to the back end, it's now all of a sudden a 60-yard field goal. They're not going to attempt that. So I understand that creates that. It's also a player safety thing. Not only does it open up play calling in the red zone, but it's also player safety thing having that there. So, and then from a visual standpoint, I think if you move the goalpost to the back end, it would look so beautiful. It would open up that end zone and really show off the great 20-yard end zone that the CFL has. Could you imagine? I hate using the "what if this was in the NFL" excuse, but could you imagine if in the NFL they had 20-yard end zones? How would Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers and play callers feel about having that much space to operate and score? So that's my one thing. If I was changing anything, perhaps you can do something similar to the XFL kickoff, which I thought was awesome. But from a player safety, from a scoring standpoint, you saw it in the playoffs, how teams struggled, particularly so with Toronto against Hamilton, how teams struggled in the red zone area scoring and how limited people were there. And I think play calling is a big factor. Like a lot of the CFL coaches need to be more aggressive and go for it more on 3rd down. I think you'd see more scoring in the league and more excitement, more drama. Like I said, the CFL has room for growth if they take the right steps. I think it's already a great league. And yes, that gray-haired comment about every generation complains about the last and blames the older generation for any of their issues. Like, so you see that with television and all that, you know, people tend to ignore the 50+ crowd and all that, or they tend to blame them for the product being lame. So you're always looking to appeal to the younger crowd and to draw them in. The CFL also has to do a better job marketing and reaching out to, and getting feedback from kids in Canada who are involved in football and all that, who have interest in sports, and to rope them into it as well. So there's a lot of different layers to this, but I don't think the CFL, to me, like I said, room for growth with the Canadian Football League. They can be so much better than they are. It's really the business side of things where they need to figure it out. They're behind when it comes to fantasy football. They're behind when it comes to gambling. They've been behind when it comes to marketing and promotion. They're behind when it comes to promoting their own players. So they need to catch up. They got a lot of catching up to do. As far as the product on the field, the CFL is a great league. It's fun to watch. So that's my opinion on it. Sorry for rambling there, Donald. And just like you, I had a very lengthy message. So
that's good. Kyle had 2. We played one of Kyle's. Vincent has 2. We're going to play one. We got 24 and then we got 12 seconds. We'll do the 24. We'll see what Vincent has to say because I want to get through all these before we let you go. I don't want to double up.
Hey, Markcast. Vince Guerrero here. XFL question. Out of the 2 dates, which do you think is going to be further apart from the original 2019 plan in 2022? Do you think the coaching announcements in February will take place close to February 2022, or do you think the team announcements in September will take close to September 2022? Thanks. Bye.
Vincent has like a baby crying in the background. Vincent, I think you need to go take care of your offspring here before. But no, I'm glad we got the questions. We have 2 of them. But what do you think about that? TV dates, all this. I'm all thrown off with the timelines from before.
I'm with you on that too. I feel the same way. I think people are going back to the old calendar a little too much and going, well, this has to be the date. This has to be the date. I mean, the XFL is in a better position than the USFL is. You're going to be getting a lot of USFL news all at the same time, but they only have a few months to go here before they set everything up. Training camp, players, how they're going to allocate players, all that stuff. The XFL has more time. I don't stick to specifics. We know now, at least from what we saw with the meeting at Redbird, that the league's planning showcases in June. You'd have all your coaches and everything lined up by then, all your teams announced by then. So you're not going to move forward with player showcases without all your teams being established. Like you heard from The Rock today, we're going to be getting the teams and the city names and the team names and all that coming up very shortly. We're talking about January, February. And by the same token, we'll get the broadcast rollout and layout and what that's going to look like. That's going to be fascinating. And then from there, you'll start to see them hire coaches and everything. As far as specific dates, the timeline we all know is February's kickoff, right? So in 2023. So they got a year, and Rock mentioned it today on CNBC. They got a year and change to get that all set up for kickoff. And there's going to be a lot of news as far as when it is, March, April. There'll be plenty of it. People remember, if you follow the XFL back then, it took a while for all the coaches to get hired. I remember when they only had 3 or 4 coaches hired and people were like, wait a minute, but what's going on here? Who's going to coach in St. Louis? So it took a while for them to line that all up. So you don't expect all 8 at once. I mean, it could happen, but it might be staggered a little bit. The key is getting everything in order by the time you get to the fall, when you start, putting all these rosters together and getting ready for camp and all that. So we'll get it in due time. I think XFL fans by now, at least guys like me that have been around since 2001, you should know a little bit about being patient. I waited almost 20 years for the XFL to come back, and we've been very patient. Only had 5 weeks of play, and we've been patient waiting towards 2023. So the date's not that important. They have to have that all set up. The USFL, they're pushing it. They need to get on it, and I'm sure they have plans. They're getting ready to announce coaches and all that. So, and they just got to move quickly.
It's one of those things like, just because you're not seeing it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's hard, especially now where we have Danny posting stuff on Instagram, right? Like back maybe 2 years ago, that would have been a press release, right? Like XFL training camps to launch June, whatever. And now this is the way we are now. We post that on Instagram like an Easter egg. So it's weird to even putting the timelines together, trying to lay one on top of the other, but also they're just announcing things far differently now than they did 2 years ago, than they did with Vince and Oliver and all that.
That's exactly the case. And the fact that they're heading to new cities, not all of them, but the fact that they're heading to new cities with some new teams, they have to announce that first before they can get to all the coaches and all that kind of stuff. So all in due time, it's all going to be set up and structured. You get the broadcast package deal, where the teams are going to be playing. That's key. That's vital. All the new merch that's going to be involved. And then from there, you got to put all the teams together and then get scout players, draft them, all that. I think the timeline will be similar to the last XFL in terms of when players are drafted, when they're signed, when camp takes place, that kind of thing. That's all going to be ironed out. They have a time for that, and they have a plan for that.
We have a voicemail here from your friend and mine, Jake Henry. Jake, take it away.
Hey guys, just thought I'd ask, how soon into 2022 will info about teams be revealed? It has to be relatively soon, right? Especially after reading the bios for the football ops hires. Yeah, thanks.
So he's referring to XFL, I assume, right? Because I mean, we still need information on USFL. We still need a little bit of information.
I'm going to assume here, Jake's a great fan. I'm going to assume that his question came before today's news, right? So now we know. We know January, February on that end. Jake's awesome, by the way. I'm surprised that wasn't St. Louis related. I know in his heart and his mind, he wants to know if the Battlehawks will be back. I've been told, every indication that I've been given is that St. Louis is going to be part of the XFL in 2023. If they're not, if for whatever reason they had a change of heart, it's a foolish move on their part. And they're the XFL. I was surprised that the USFL didn't journey into, to be honest with you, St. Louis and San Antonio. That would have been a direct shot across the bow, for lack of a better term. So that opening is there for them. And I think St. Louis, without a doubt, is going to be part of the XFL. Otherwise, Jerry Cardinal and Danny Garcia and Dwayne Johnson need to just fold up shop right now if they make a different decision on that one. I understand you got to line up venues and business arrangements and all that. Would be extremely foolish for them to go otherwise. And I haven't heard anything otherwise.
Insane that USFL didn't go to St. Louis, right?
Insane. I understand why they're doing Birmingham, because obviously they're right now everything they're doing is cost related.
Yeah.
So Birmingham, they found a great partner, willing place that's willing to put some finances in and help you out in the early going, and that's a great deal for both sides. It's a good marriage. But yes, St. Louis and San Antonio. If you're following these leagues, if you follow the AAF and you follow the XFL. Foolish not to consider both those markets after what they just did in the Alliance, and obviously with St. Louis. The Battlehawks were amazing, so it was awesome.
It's just crazy to me that we're just calling the team names anything, right? It could be the Seattle Barracudas. I mean, it could be whatever. And so it's like, I would just call one of the teams St. Louis just to like.
Yeah, because they're in Birmingham anyway, right?
It doesn't matter. Like,
so yeah. So right, exactly. That's their decision, I suppose. From one of the things I've heard, you hear a lot of things right now with a lot of the USFL players and coaches. They're all giving me all kinds of information. There's some people that think that entire TSL teams are going to just be transferred over, that kind of thing. I've heard that one, but there's so many different theories. There's so much. Everybody's got different information as far as that goes. But one of the things I heard with the USFL is that they already have potential ownership groups in mind for their franchises. Now, whether or not they got to iron that out, I mean, they're still waiting to announce their Birmingham deal. But I think they have an idea. Brian Woods attempted this. I understand this isn't completely Brian Woods' league, but he attempted this with the FXFL to sell off his franchises, and he had ownership groups that he was trying to work with to iron that out. Didn't really work out. But I'm sure Fox has an idea, and that's the whole point of this upcoming hub season, is to showcase the league. So you can sell the franchises, sell the league itself to sponsors and all that. So it's going to be fascinating to see how that all pans out.
All right, we got three more busting through. We got Van here. Van's a longtime listener. Van the man. He manages the XFL Dragons group on Facebook. Little condescension. I'm just going to say this. A little condescend. I can't even say that word with my braces.
Condescending?
Condescending nature with Van, a little bit with his calling you an insider. But I will say that this is a fascinating question. I think this is a fascinating question. I'm really curious.
Interesting. Interesting.
How about asking your insider, how does the current NIL contracts interact or influence the league signings for CFL, USFL, and XFL? In my world, a player with significant NIL income would differ from playing in Canada. The lack of exposure would diminish the value of the NIL. Also, what is the projected salary for CFL players? I know that they took a protracted salary in 2021. Is it enough to pull players north? Playing on a CFL roster would cost a potential NFL season, where a season XFL can transform onto an NFL practice squad or team rosters. The current USFL season would also have its impediments from playing on an NFL team or practice squad in the same year. What's your comment?
Two things. First off, they did say, and that Brian Johnson in that interview said that they did keep in mind the USFL schedule, right, with them potentially being able to hop onto camps. So I would say that they also kind of base their schedule around that, right?
Sure. Like when is their season scheduled to end? In June, at least, presumably, in this first go around. So it does leave an opening there. There are a lot of different reasons for the timelines of these leagues. I'm not going to get into a whole histrionics about this, but there's a belief system that if you start right after the Super Bowl in February, not only do you have a better opening for players to latch on to the NFL, more op players will choose to play in your league, but also there's a belief system in terms of viewership that in the months of February and March, you have more people that are at home, and that you can expand your viewership that way, like in the Northeast and all that. People that are watching television during those times, they aren't outside as they are in May and June and what have you. So you have less of the pie there. So there's a lot of different factors there. I think, what was that gentleman's name? I apologize for. Was it Van?
Yeah.
Okay. It's a very good question. A lot of good stuff in there, tidbits in there. He made mention of, I'm sorry, I lost myself there for a second.
Okay. Well, the idea that people, right, if you're starting to get paid NIL, right, you're starting to get paid to play in college, right? And so the idea is...
the NIL, right, that is correct. Thanks.
But then the idea is, and I get that too, where it's like, well, and that's, this whole USFL, CFL, and XFL debate is like, if I can get paid relatively the same amount of money to be in the States, I'm not going to go to Canada. Like, I mean, that, I think that is why we're discussing all these leagues together.
Yeah, and he's talked about timeline, whether players would choose the leagues based on timeline. And he's talking about NIL. NIL has changed the game. Has changed the game for college players, for universities now. You see in the players choosing, Jackson State because they have a nice NIL and, of course, that exposure and all that. And so I think that could factor in. Canada's always had those issues of whether or not they can entice American players to come north of the border, so to speak. And the NIL could factor in. Could be another layer, another factor. It's also changed the game a little bit. When the XFL was coming out, part of the plan that they had long-term was to entice college players to leave college early to play for them. And now that college players can be compensated for their image and likeness, there's less of that urge to go ahead and turn pro immediately. So I think, I'm not saying that's going to hurt the XFL or USFL. They could still get players from that window, just like the XFL had Kenny Robinson, who was drafted into the NFL, was in the transfer portal. And so I think the NIL could be a factor. I think as far in terms of Canadian teams, Canadian players, American players might consider not going to Canada if they can make more money here in the States and play in the States. The key to that is these leagues like the XFL and USFL proving their viability first and their scale of pay. So the CFL numbers, I know they're going for a new CBA and there's going to be some changes there. So it's hard to say. I know players didn't make as much this year as they would have made back in 2019. There were some American players who played in the XFL that played in the CFL that weren't too happy with the amount of money that they got this past season, that reached out to me and talked to me about that. As for the insider thing, notice, by the way, this isn't about me, but I don't label myself as an insider. I'm a pretty humble guy. I'm uncomfortable. Anybody calling me an insider? I'm lucky enough to get any information on this stuff. So I just brought it up there with a player, brought me some information there. But I think the points there by Van are very interesting ones. The timeline, whether or not, we're thinking about that whole NFL thing, whether guys will consider playing in the XFL rather than USFL because of the timeline, whether the guys will consider playing the XFL rather than the CFL because of the timeline. That's certainly possible. Like I mentioned briefly there, February and March are 2 months that a lot of these leagues get started. I know the weather's a factor, but weather's also a factor in terms of people being at home, because come spring months, April, May, June, July, people are out and about on their summer vacations and doing their thing. So anyway, that's
the whole CFL. People don't watch in the summer because they're farming and they're on their vacation homes, and then they come home. I've heard all of that. Were you saying that the player was upset that they went from the XFL to the CFL, weren't getting paid enough, or went from the CFL? Yeah,
from the XFL. And then, mind you, now it wasn't like the XFL was breaking the bank there, but pay was much different, and this individual is hoping to be back in the States, hopefully getting an NFL workout, getting opportunity, and or maybe in the USFL or XFL. It just enjoyed their stay there, played really well. This particular individual, just the money wasn't great. At least for him, an entry-level guy. Some of the guys in the CFL, a lot of American rookies this year were very impactful, had great years. But, the money is what it is when, in that entry-level spot. And if you're not accustomed to being in Canada, you have to weigh that.
Yeah, you got to have two different, all that stuff. All right, last two, we got Kevin. Kevin's from Australia. You'll notice the accent.
Ahoy, guys. This is Kevin, long-time listener of the show. I have two questions. The first one being, what major changes do you think the XFL will consider now that we kind of have better understanding what the USFL is trying to be and how they're operating. And my second one's a little bit more general. Out of the USFL and XFL, who do you think has the advantage when it comes to being the more successful spring football league in the long term? Thanks, guys. Happy holidays.
Yeah, what's the boardroom at Redbird think about that, all this USFL nonsense?
What's that?
So what is the boardroom in Redbird or at Redbird? With the Hulk statue, right? When they're sitting there and the guy,
yeah, right.
Yeah, what do they make of the Brian Woodses and the USFLs of the world?
I think there's a respect there because obviously the whole Fox involvement, but I know that the two leagues are operating from different mindsets. The USFL is thinking start small and build big. The XFL, perhaps matching the Hulk there, is thinking about starting huge, being right out the gate. So we'll see which one wins out there. But I think there's respect level on both sides. And they realize that they exist in the space. Now, it might be a little bit different because the XFL season will start in February and then it'll just end as the USFL is starting. But it's going to be fascinating to see these two leagues operate and compete for coaches and players and how that's all going to work out. So some people are out there who've gotten in my ear and have told me that they don't think that both leagues, that there's enough football talent to sustain. Well, I don't agree necessarily with that, but I've gotten that viewpoint from people. So could they cancel each other out eventually? Could one cancel each other out? These are the questions that we had during the whole alliance run that we never got to live, and we're going to live with this upcoming battle, so to speak.
All right, last one, Dan. I can't remember. Dan left this one. I can't remember what he asked in this one. I remembered most of the other ones. So let's see what Dan says. Last one for today.
Hello, Mike. Go Argos. Just wondering, what do you think the odds are that the CFL XFL talks restart within 5 years? Thanks, buddy.
That's a good place to end. That's a good place to end the voice. What do you think about the merger talks coming out again?
Well, he scored a point with me with the Go Argos part. I think it's possible that the two leagues can maintain a friendship in the future. As far as, I don't think they're going to go as far as they were. They broke off, obviously. I think, they were close to getting engaged and perhaps setting a wedding date, but the ring was ready, but the CFL got cold feet. A lot of their people there got cold feet. And so that put an end to it. Their vision wasn't the same. They couldn't line up correctly. So they had totally different visions. And then CFL is a unique dynamic with different ownership groups there that makes it kind of hard to have one single-minded vision. There's a little bit of warring going on between those ownership groups there, the way they feel that things should be handled. So I think it's possible. It would be in the best interest of both leagues if they maintain some sort of relationship. Maybe in the future, marketing or promotion. The Rock has ties, obviously, to the Canadian Football League. It would be nice if they did something together.
How close were they to really working together?
Very close. The CFL and XFL were very close. Like I said, they were close to getting engaged. They just couldn't get all 9 ownership groups to agree to move forward. I think there were some aspects of the XFL and what Redbird had planned that really rang true with them. And then I think the CFL is actually, with Genius and other things, is actually moving forward with some of the ideas they picked up with talking with Redbird. But I think it was just very difficult for them to get everybody on the same page. And as far as the CFL goes, and they didn't want to relinquish some of the things. They didn't want to make any real changes to their overall product. They were scared of alienating people in Canada. And so I think you can pretty much guess which ownership groups were on board and which weren't. There were a few on the CFL side that were really intrigued. And I think a lot of those business things the CFL is going to try. But in terms of the on-field stuff, they were reluctant to make any changes there. I think Van mentioned something about rules. I just wanted to mention this. Big thing with the XFL is how much it's going to resemble the league we fell in love with in 2020 in terms of innovation and the rules. And one of the big issues that I see with XFL 2023 is that hopefully they can capture this, is the omission of not having Sam Schwartzstein on as far as being part of their brain trust for the rules this coming season. I'm not saying that the people that the XFL hired aren't fully capable of working on technology and strategy and innovation and analytics and all that. They certainly have a strong team they put together, but I think Sam Schwartzstein did such a phenomenal job and put so much care and thought into the XFL and the rules that it's a shame that he's not going to be a part. I do know that there are some people within the USFL that have interest in Sam Schwartzstein. It's not everyone there, but that would be the person I would look towards bringing into the fold, into my executive team if I was running one of these leagues. But obviously I'm not in that position. But I just want to mention Sam, who did a phenomenal job with the XFL rules and his innovations. And it's a shame that he's not going to be a part. It looks like it at this point, unless there's some kind of change. It looks like that Sam Schwartzstein's not going to be a part of the XFL in 2023 or in 2022 as we move towards 2023.
Last question for me. CFL, XFL, we just had the voicemail. You've written in the past NFL, XFL, right? You know, with the Danny had the Easter egg and all that. A higher chance of which happening in the next 5 years?
I think there could be relationships with both. I think the NFL one could be a stronger one in terms of marketing and promotion. You got to look at who you got to look at Redbird Capital and who they have connections with. And they have connections with the NFL, with NFL players as far as association goes, and with NFL partners, broadcasting, streaming partners, all that. And you look at Kevin LaForce and Jerry Cardinal and their relationships with Dallas Cowboys and others. I think it's a strong possibility. And I know that this is something that's on the table for them to work with the NFL in some capacity. To get the stamp of approval from the NFL would be fascinating. Being on NFL Network or any of that stuff would be fascinating. We saw that with the AAF. So I think there's a chance that the XFL could remain friendly with the CFL and do some promotion here and there. But I think that ship, you never know what could happen. But I think that ship has sailed for them to have an alignment, so to speak. And I think there's a better chance of the XFL having some sort of arrangement with the National Football League, whether that be marketing, promotion, otherwise. I don't know necessarily that it would be some type of developmental league, because as I mentioned earlier in this conversation, these leagues are developmental leagues by default anyway, because it gives NFL teams the opportunity to see players that, they haven't had the opportunity to see on with their teams getting game action. So the XFL affords these players that opportunity. So I think it's funny if the XFL were to work with both the CFL, and you want to be good partners in this landscape. I mean, nobody needs to go to war with each other. So it'd be cool if these leagues would be partners with each other. I've seen the suggestion of the USFL working with the XFL. I think that's funny. I mean, anything is possible. But yes, I do think that the XFL could do something with the NFL. I think that's probably more likely than the CFL part of it, at least of any significance.
In March 2030, I'm going to do an oral history of the CFL XFL talks. I think wouldn't that be fascinating? We'll do a 2-hour documentary. We'll have enough time will pass. We'll talk with everyone. We'll do the oral history with Mike Mitchell starring. We'll do a talking head. We'll do the whole thing. We'll do a 30 for 30 of the rise and fall of the CFL. Who is winning the merch? And I have to let you go. This has been forever. I don't know how long we've been on this call, but thank you so much for your time. I'm sure everyone is very appreciative. We have Kevin the Australian. We have Van. We have Dan, Jake Henry. Vincent, I'm trying to think of people that haven't won gifts before, right? Kyle has won something before. Richard, for real would be a good one. Richard's a long time. Zach's won things in the past before. Zach, you've won things in the past. So who are we voting at before we go? I would say Vincent. I would say Richard, for real. Or I would say Kevin. All right, that Kevin has gotten stuff from Australia. Or Dan. Who do we got?
As much as I want to pick Donald because of the namesake and the Australian accent guy was awesome. I forgot his name. I'm sorry. Kevin, was it?
Kevin,
great question, by the way, Kevin. All great questions. I'm going to give it to Richard. I'm going to give Richard a shout. He's such a loyal follower and supporter of these leagues. And such an awesome guy who has awesome opinions. And he listens to your work, reads my work, and he's just awesome. I'm glad people like him exist in this space. So what are we giving him again? What are you giving him again, Reid?
Richard, you DM me, you get your choice of merch from his USFL shop. So there you go. You get your Generals beanie or get your Stallions. I want some sweats. I think we get Richard for real and some of those awesome sweatpants he had. But Richard, send me a DM. We're connected on Twitter. Mike Mitchell, thank you so much for your time. Truly doing the Lord's work. I don't know how long. Max is messaging me. He's like, "Are you still talking with Mike right now?" Yes, we're talking with Mike right now. So thank you all so much again. Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, and all that stuff. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Reid.
Welcome back to the show.
That was a lot. Mike put in his work today. Mike put in his work. We talked a lot afterward too, but yeah, hour 8 minutes of Mike Mitchell content. I hope you enjoy that. Christmas gift from us, and we did all your questions. Richard, though, for real, won the giveaway. We picked his comment as the best one, and so Richard already knows, but DM me. We'll hook you up with some USFL merch from the shop. So
cool. Speaking of the USFL, they've dropped 3 different promos during NFL games on Fox. I have not seen any of the promos yet.
You haven't seen any of them. They've been on everything.
I've been watching much TV. I've been stuck.
You've been working. You're working. So yeah. So these came out. They're little 10-second things. What's interesting about it is they started playing on Thursday Night Football last week. Which, if you've been tracking any of the Thursday Night Football, like it's moving to Amazon right next year, and so this is kind of the last that Fox is going to have like that huge mega game that everyone's going to watch on Thursday. The one is showing like you're kicking the spring football ball. The second one's talking about spring football. And then the third one, a lot of people are saying you can hear Gus Johnson. And then I'm not a big college football guy, but apparently that is a big get to have Gus Johnson involved in that. Are you
solid? Yeah, it's a solid get.
So it's his voice in there saying like, so here we go. And like I said, I don't watch college football with that. Listener Seth pointed out last week, Thursday Night Football got 11.32 million viewers. So that is a tremendous amount of people that could potentially be seeing the USFL promos right now. They're talking about, there's complaints online. The USFL isn't marketing. Well, there you go.
Well, they've already passed 100,000 followers on social media, so they're doing something right.
Yeah, and this was interesting. So Connor used to work for News Hub. Connor is covering like NASCAR and a lot of racing now. He was talking with Robert Gitlib on Twitter. Say what?
Gottlieb.
I can't pronounce. He's the executive vice president of marketing for Fox Sports, and he was saying, asking him, why aren't you putting the USFL social media handles, things like that in your commercial spots? He goes, the primary reason we just want football viewers now knowing that the USFL is coming in April. Awareness building, not engagement at this time. These are very quick spots, simple and clean is often the best way to land your message.
I don't know if I agree. I part of the whole idea of like awareness building is social media. Like they're not getting it.
Well, it's weird to me that we have Danny Garcia talking. Mike and I went into this, but she did this whole podcast interview last week talking about their multi-layered 360-degree approach, and they're going to be on all these different platforms. And then you're like, hey, USFL, why aren't you putting your social media stuff on like, we don't need it right now. It's just interesting. It's just two different sides of the coin. I'm not saying one is right. I'm not saying one is wrong, but it's two interesting sides of the coin.
One is definitely not forward thinking. Social media just isn't for engagement; it's for audience building as well. Like, come on.
I agree. So. This is interesting. Walmart, you can get throwback USFL merch at Walmart. I'm going to put this tweet on the thing. I put today. I learned that Walmart has USFL merch.
USFL CFL and XFL scouts to attend the Tropical Bowl Combine. Looks like a lot of scouts there to check out the talent. Potentially players that aren't going to the NFL or might not make the NFL. They're getting checked out.
Yeah, this is something. I mean, scouts are going to be around. XFL scouts were around before. USFL, they had spring league scouts, but this gets a lot of traction. Like, oh my God, they're yeah, they're going to be. Doug Whaley's going to be there. That's what the scouts do
every year.
But these are the things that people talk about. Doug Whaley's going to be there. USFL people are going to be there, but it's exciting.
XFL making 6 new hires in their football operations department. A lot of names here. So
yeah, this is the terrible way I copied and pasted over. They're bringing back a lot of former XFL people like Russ Giglio. He is going to be part of the group. We previously mentioned Doug Whaley as the director of football operations. Jim Monrose. I've added a lot of these people on LinkedIn. We're connecting on them. This kind of goes in line, right? We're bringing up the TV deals. We're bringing up the new cities and all that stuff. This is a lot of the football player side of things. So, certainly, like we said, we're going to be scouting the players. We're going to be hiring the director of player administration and officiating. And we're going to be doing all of these things together. Mike Mitchell had on here some of these names aren't familiar with many who have followed alternate leagues in the past. Whereas Giglio, he had been with the XFL and the AAF before. Bobby Monica is returning as the director of equipment. And then Brand Campbell, he was kind of the football technology person before. So he is coming back. So it's a lot of these. If you're worried about the XFL not feeling like the old XFL, they're bringing back a lot of the team.
That's good. Another league that, that we cover from time to time here. Fan Controlled Football 2.0 season kicking off April 16th, 2022, just like the 2.0 season was kicking off in August last year, right?
I missed this. Like, they announced this last week. I totally, like, I saw this online and I thought, did I miss? Well, they announced it in the Twitter space, Paul.
A Twitter space.
I mean, so I guess so Rob,
in an NFT that you get better results when you announce it in an NFT.
I just thought that was weird because I saw that online. I'm like, I thought they were kicking off in February, so I guess they're kicking off in April. So that means they are directly competing against the USFL because the USFL is going to be playing on Fridays and Saturdays, and they're also going to be very much competing for players. Because I would have thought the benefit of launching in February would be you could sign some of these players before they went to the USFL, right? But now that they're both competing at the same time. Right? Because I thought, they're going to launch, because you got to be signing players now, right, to go in February.
It's funny to me. It's funny.
And then listener Seth wins the tweet of the week. So they tweeted this out. Flair Networks, reimagining pro football for the modern digital world through our new partnership with FCF. This partnership marries together the cutting edge in live sports, esports, and blockchain to bring a fan experience that was never possible until now. So then Seth tweets, honestly, I think most fans have been demanding more blockchain in sports. But just the other day, I was telling the Markcast, if I don't get some blockchain with my CFL, USFL, and XFL, I was just going to die. Sarcasm.
Blockchain? I'm intrigued how the blockchain thing works with sports. Stats?
Right, that has to do with, like, we're buying the NFTs, right? It's securing them, right? The blockchains are securing the NFTs.
I guess maybe that's what they're doing. Yeah, the NFTs. You're like, I want that highlight. I want to buy it for like $10,000.
Yeah, or I want the different shoes for my avatar. It's the big thing about avatars. It feels like World of Warcraft to me, where it's like I'm going to have my avatar have like the best armor.
It's not even like an avatar thing. It's just like a piece of art.
Yeah. I don't get the NFT. Like, I've seen these Twitter things. I'm like, so everyone has a monkey, but they're all just different, right? Like, they're all just like
That's a type of NFT, but there's all these types of NFTs. Like, you could essentially, if you wanted to, you could essentially take your Mike Mitchell interview that you just did, that's an hour long, and make an NFT of that. Swear to God.
Max would buy it. Listener Max would buy our Mike Mitchell. But you gotta say, like, why would I pay $10,000 for a slightly different monkey head with like the eyeball falling out versus like the headband? But like, you know what I mean?
Don't do it, bro.
And then what do you do with it besides, like, it's your Twitter profile, but do you like, what do you do with it otherwise?
I don't know. It's like a virtual trading card. It's so like I think that like Bitcoin, all this stuff is really cool shit. Like, I'm cool with that. But like this NFT thing, I was just like, wait, what? And they're like, oh, you have this one of a kind piece of art. I'm like, oh, I just screenshotted it. Now it's not one of a kind.
Yeah. Like, well, that's the problem. Is it like you know how YouTube TV can like disable, like, you can't screen record on your iPhone whilst watching YouTube TV. Like, they need to figure out how to do that. Like, disable screenshots
for NFTs,
right? Like, if I have, it's just wild. I just don't. I've seen a lot of these monkey heads around, and I just don't understand why they're so valuable.
We sound like boomers right now.
That's fine.
We're so like, hey, what are you kids with your crazy NFTs doing today? It's like pogs and crap.
Well, it is, right? I mean, it is, though, right? Like, it's a new pog. Like it is. It's like a new pog. Like, do you play with the pogs? Like, no. Like, I just keep them in my sleeve. Right, like I keep them in my.
That is my Pokemon collection.
So we never played, but that was the thing too. Like, we never played. Like, I collected the whole Star Wars Phantom Menace, had the whole trading card set. I never played it. I just had all the cards.
Yeah.
With like, like Natalie Portman and stuff, like Queen Amidala.
It's just so wild. I love it. I don't know what it's about, but it's great. It makes for some banter. So it'll be interesting to see how blockchain gets involved with the FCF here. I'm going to check this out. I really am going to look into this. Patrick, you got me for once.
Patrick's killing it. So.
All right. Want to thank everybody thank Mike Mitchell for joining us earlier in the show. Like and subscribe our podcast. Share it out to your friends and family. Please, please, please. Of course, when we hit certain subscriber numbers, we do giveaways. So yeah, please share out the podcast. Get everybody interested, involved. We're covering everything USFL, XFL, CFL, and these FCF guys, I guess, too, that are coming up with NFTs for their crappy football products. So.
Yeah, we just crossed 1,600 subscribers, so we're moving to 2,000. We just hit 1,600 today. So yeah, we have our big Grey Cup. I have all of our CFL merch ready to give away. Yeah, and Richard gets his shop USFL. That was like a bonus giveaway because I didn't want to devalue our 2000 giveaway. So.
Again, the place to leave a voicemail is
speakpipe.com/Markcast. It's on the screen.
You might want to say, the Markcast. You might want to like make that little thing that you do where you're like markcast.com/merch,
markcast.com/call Reid and Paul.
But so what?
No, I was just like
call Reid and Paul. Okay.
Yeah, like markcast.com/voicemail. Maybe we should, but it is speakpipe.com/Markcast. The graphics have been built. So
very cool stuff. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next.
And Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
I mean, we didn't really do too much Christmassy stuff.
We didn't go crazy for the Christmas, but didn't we do sweaters last year too?
I think we didn't. I had a hat, but then Dorothy hid it. When I filmed my Mike Mitchell interview, I had my hat, but then I don't know where.
That's right, and I had the Die Hard.
Yeah,
sweatshirt that said, "Now I have a machine gun." Ho ho ho! Yeah, I remember that now. I remember that Christmas episode.
It's late. Paul's worked all day. We're good. We've done it.
Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you here next week.